The dinner was set for 6:30. My sister called me at 6:29 to say they'd moved it to 7. That 1-minute notice was the most honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in 11 years. I know that because I still have the call log. Date stamped. Duration: 42 seconds. I keep it in a folder I labeled baseline documentation. I am an estate planning paralegal. I keep folders for everything. This is the story of what I found inside my late grandfather's estate, what my family assumed they would inherit from it, and why the promissory note he signed in 1994, the one nobody thought to mention at the funeral, turned out to be the most important document I have ever read 3 times in a row. Welcome to Family Revenge Stories New, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts and family learns that boundaries have a price. If stories about dignity, documents, and consequences are what you come here for, drop a comment and subscribe. You're in the right place. My name is irrelevant. My credential is not. I have spent 14 years as an estate planning paralegal at a mid-size firm in a mid-size city. I draft wills. I prepare trust instruments. I track beneficiary designations through transfers and amendments and the particular kind of selective memory that tends to develop in families where money is involved. I read documents for the specific purpose of understanding what they say versus what people wish they said. Those are almost never the same thing. My grandfather called me his precise one. Not a compliment from him, not exactly. He said precise the way other people say cold. But it was accurate. I have been precise since I was 9 years old, and I noticed that my parents paid for my sister Dana's dance classes 3 years before they paid for mine. And they paid for mine only until I asked a clarifying question about the family budget. I was 9. They stopped the following month. I understood then that our household ran on a specific arithmetic. Dana's wants were needs. My needs were negotiations. Dana is 4 years older than me. She has our mother's coloring, soft and blonde and photogenic, and our father's talent for making entitlement sound like enthusiasm. She has never once in her life asked for something she didn't receive. She has never once in her life received something she didn't immediately assume was the beginning of more. I want to be precise about that. It is not that Dana was cruel. It is that she was never required to see other people as full. We were background in her story. I was certainly background. I met Marcus when I was 24 and he was 26. He worked in logistics. He was not flashy. He was consistent, and he called when he said he would call, and when my grandfather was admitted to the hospital for the first time, Marcus drove 4 hours without being asked and sat with me in the waiting room and did not say a single useless thing. He brought coffee and he sat with me. We were together for 2 years before my family noticed him. That should have told me something. When they did notice him, when my mother finally met him at a Sunday dinner I'd been postponing because I already knew, they noticed him the way you notice a good piece of furniture. Oh, my mother said, "He's lovely." She said it to my father, not to me. The specific day that changed everything was a Thursday. I remember it was a Thursday because I had a deposition scheduled that morning that ran long, and I didn't get to my office until nearly noon, and I had 17 unread texts. 14 of them were from my mother. 2 were from Dana. 1 was from Marcus. Marcus's text said, "We need to talk. I'll call you tonight." He did not call that night. I did not know yet that he had driven to my parents' house that morning, at my mother's invitation, while I was in a deposition downtown. I did not know yet that my mother had spent 6 weeks prior to that morning quietly, methodically dismantling the version of our relationship Marcus thought he understood. I did not know yet that she had told him, over coffee in her kitchen, that I had been offered a position in another city, a position that did not exist, and that I had already decided to take it, and that I hadn't told him yet because I didn't know how. I did not know yet that Dana had been at that breakfast. That Dana, who had recently ended a 4-year relationship with a man who was, in my mother's words, not serious about his future, had sat across from Marcus and been warm and interested and available in all the ways I had been too tired to perform on a Thursday after a long deposition. I found this out 3 weeks later, in the parking lot of a grocery store, from a mutual friend who assumed I already knew. I sat in my car for 45 minutes. I did not cry. I found my phone. I opened a new folder and I named it Marcus/family event, and I started with what I could confirm. I had the text logs. I had the call logs. I had a voicemail from my mother from 3 weeks prior, the one I'd played twice and almost deleted, in which she said, "And I want to be precise here, I just think Marcus deserves someone who's really present, you know? You're so focused on work. Some men need more than that." I had saved it because something in the cadence felt like a trial balloon. Now I understood it was a press release. I had a photo. Dana had posted it 11 days after that Thursday. A restaurant I recognized. A table I could not see fully. But Marcus's jacket. A specific olive green canvas jacket he'd had since college. Visible at the edge of the frame. She hashtagged it New Beginnings. I saved the screenshot. I noted the timestamp. 7:43 p.m. A Wednesday. I put it in the folder and I closed my phone and I drove home and I made dinner and I sat at my table and I ate it. That was the night I stopped expecting anything from my family. Not in anger. In arithmetic. Grandfather Eli died 14 months later. I had seen him 6 times in those 14 months. He called me on Sundays when his hands weren't too bad. And we talked about the news and about his garden and about a book he was rereading for the 3rd time. He never mentioned Marcus. He never mentioned Dana. He asked me once if I was doing all right, in the specific way he had of asking questions that meant I already know the answer. I told him I was precise. He laughed for a long time. He died on a Tuesday morning in April. My mother called me at 9:17. I was at my desk. I noted the time. The funeral was what it was. Dana cried beautifully. My mother organized the flowers. My father handled the obituary. I prepared the thank you notes because I have legible handwriting and because no one else thought to do it, and because when there is a task that requires care and no one else reaches for it, I reach for it. I always have. This is the arithmetic I mentioned. I was not named as executor. My father was named as executor. I had drafted enough wills to know that executor designation and beneficiary designation are separate questions, and I filed that understanding away and waited. 11 days after the funeral, I received a call from a man named Gerald Ashworth. He was the attorney who had drafted grandfather Eli's final estate documents. He asked if I could come to his office at my earliest convenience. I went the following morning. I sat across from Gerald Ashworth in a leather chair that had absorbed 20 years of difficult conversations, and he slid a folder across the desk, and I opened it. The primary document was a trust instrument. Revocable during grandfather Eli's lifetime, irrevocable at death. The trust held the primary asset. The house. The house on Carmody Lane where I had spent every Christmas until I was 15, where the garden was maintained obsessively, where the spare room had a specific quilt my grandmother had made that I had slept under more nights than I could count. The house on Carmody Lane was valued in the most recent appraisal at $387,000. The trust named me as sole beneficiary. I read the sentence twice. Then I read the entire document from the beginning. Gerald Ashworth let me read. He did not speak. This is one of the things I respect about attorneys who have been doing this for a long time. They understand that reading is not the same as understanding, and that understanding takes the time it takes. On the 3rd pass, I found the secondary instrument. It was attached as Exhibit C. It was a promissory note dated March 14, 1994. It documented a loan of $47,000 made by Eli Harmon to his son, my father, for the purpose of a business venture that had dissolved by 1997. The note bore a simple interest rate of 3%. It had never been repaid. It had never been forgiven in writing. With interest accrued over 30 years, the outstanding balance as calculated in the attached schedule was $109,841. Gerald Ashworth cleared his throat softly. He said, "Your grandfather amended the trust in the final 6 months of his life. The note was always on file. He simply chose in the end to attach it." I looked at the date on the amendment. It was dated 11 days after the Sunday phone call where I told grandfather Eli I was precise, and he had laughed for a long time. I sat with that for a moment. I asked Gerald Ashworth if my father had been notified. He said, "That will happen when the estate formally opens, which requires the executor to file. Your father has not yet filed." I asked if there was anything preventing a beneficiary from requesting that filing commence. He said no. There is not. I thanked him. picked up my folder. I drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, and I sat at a corner table and I read everything 2 more times. Then I called my attorney. Not my employer's firm, my personal attorney. A woman named Patricia who handles the kind of matters that require both precision and patience. And I said, I need you to send a letter to the estate of Eli Harmon requesting the executor commence formal filing proceedings. Patricia said, I'll have it out by end of day. I ordered a second coffee. I sat there for another hour. Outside the window, April was doing what April does. If you have ever watched someone spend 30 years being the one who shows up, writes the notes, makes the drive, sits in the waiting room, while someone else takes the seat at the table, you already know what comes next. Stay with me, because this is where the receipts come out of the folder. My mother called on a Friday afternoon, 8 days after the letter had been sent. She did not mention the letter. She mentioned the house. She said, your father and I have been thinking, and we really feel like the family should discuss what to do with Carmody Lane. Your father is executor, and obviously there are a lot of feelings involved, and we just want everyone to be on the same page. I said, of course. I said, when were you thinking? She said, Sunday dinner. She said, we'd love to have everyone together. It would mean a lot to your grandfather's memory. I noted she said everyone twice. I said I'd be there. Dana called that Saturday morning. This was unusual. We had not spoken on the phone since the previous Christmas, and that call had lasted 6 minutes and consisted primarily of Dana describing a vacation she and Marcus were planning. Dana said she just wanted to check in. She said she hoped I wasn't making things difficult. She said, I know you and Dad have had your differences, but this is a family asset and I think we all feel like it should stay in the family, you know? I asked her what she meant by stay in the family. She paused just long enough for me to understand she had not prepared for that question. She said, well, Marcus and I have been looking at houses and Carmody Lane is so meaningful to all of us. We just thought. I said, I'll see you Sunday. And I ended the call. I spent Saturday preparing a folder. I printed the trust instrument. I printed the promissory note. I printed the interest schedule. I printed the amendment date. I printed the call log from the Sunday I had spoken with grandfather Eli 11 days before he signed the amendment. I put everything in a manila folder. I wrote nothing on the tab. I set it on my kitchen table and I went to bed. I slept well. I always sleep well when the documentation is complete. Sunday dinner. The table was set for 7. My parents, my father's brother and his wife, Dana, Marcus, and me. Someone had put flowers in the center, sunflowers, which had been my grandmother's favorite. I noted this. I could not tell if it was strategic or thoughtless. In my family, the difference had always been difficult to determine. My father sat at the head of the table. He was in his element. He has always been in his element when he controls the room, and he had been controlling rooms since before I understood what rooms were. We ate. The conversation was carefully maintained. Light, warm, the performance of a family at peace. Marcus sat across the table from me. He did not meet my eyes for the first 40 minutes. Dana kept her hand on his arm. After the plates were cleared, my father folded his hands on the table and said, I want to talk about what comes next for the house. He said the house the way you say my house. The preposition was simply removed. He said that as executor, he had reviewed the estate documents, and while he understood that there were some complexities, he wanted to be very clear that the family's intention was to keep Carmody Lane as a family property, to be used and maintained collectively, with the understanding that Marcus and Dana were at a stage in their lives where having that kind of stability would be, and here he paused, what Dad would have wanted. My father's brother nodded. His wife nodded. Dana reached for Marcus's hand. My father looked at me. He said, we're hoping you'll see that being flexible here is the right thing. For the family. I put my hands flat on the table. I said, can I say something? My mother said, of course, sweetheart. She said it the way you say of course when you are confident you already know what someone is going to say. I opened the folder. I placed the trust instrument on the table first. I said, this is the trust instrument grandfather Eli executed and amended. The sole beneficiary is named on page 3. I've tabbed it. My father's color changed. I placed the promissory note second. I said, this is a promissory note dated March 1994. It documents a loan of $47,000 made by grandfather Eli to his son, to you Dad, at 3% simple interest. It is attached as Exhibit C to the trust, which means the trust cannot be settled until this obligation is addressed. The current outstanding balance, with 30 years of accrued interest, is $109,841. My father said, that was a gift. I said, it was not written as a gift. Gifts don't have interest rates. I said it quietly. I turned to the next tab. I placed the amendment document on the table. I said, this is the amendment your father signed 6 months before he died. It is dated March 22nd. I have also printed the call log from March 11th, which is the Sunday he called me. We spoke for 47 minutes. I did not say what we had talked about. I didn't need to. The room was very quiet. Dana said, this is not what he would have wanted. You're doing this out of spite. I said, I'm doing this out of a promissory note. Marcus had not spoken. He was looking at the table. My father's brother, who had been quiet through all of this, who had the particular stillness of a man realizing he has been seated on the wrong side of a table, said softly, Eli never forgot anything. He said it to no one. He said it like a man reading something he'd already known was true. I did not absolve him of his silence for 30 years. But I noted the sentence. I reached into the folder one final time. I placed a single piece of paper in the center of the table. It was a handwritten note on grandfather Eli's personal stationery. The cream paper with the small EH monogram in the upper left corner. Gerald Ashworth had given it to me in a sealed envelope on my second visit to his office. He said grandfather Eli had left it for me specifically, with instructions it be given to me when the time is right, and she will know when that is. The note said 7 lines. I read only one aloud. A precise person understands that a transaction is not completed by the person who forgets it. It is completed by the person who remembers. I let that sit for a moment. Then I stood up, picked up my folder. I said, my attorney will be in touch about the timeline for settling the estate. I said it to the room. I did not say it to anyone specifically. I said one more thing before I left. I said, the sunflowers are a nice touch. And I walked out. The estate settled over the following 4 months. The promissory note was treated as an outstanding debt of the estate. My father's portion of any other estate assets, a small brokerage account, a vehicle, was applied first toward the outstanding balance. It did not cover it. My attorney negotiated a structured repayment agreement for the remainder, secured against my father's property. This is not unusual. It is, in fact, exactly how a promissory note works when the debtor has simply been waiting for the other party to die. The house on Carmody Lane transferred to me on a Tuesday morning in August. The closing took 45 minutes. I signed 7 documents. My hand was steady. Dana and Marcus did not purchase a home together. I know this because the city's property records are public documents and I checked once, approximately 6 months after the estate closed, out of what I will describe only as professional habit. They moved into a rental. Dana called me twice in the period following the settlement. I did not return the calls. Not out of anger. Out of completion. There is a difference. My father's brother called me on the night after the dinner. He called from his personal phone and he left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes. He said he had known about the promissory note for many years. He said he had told himself it was not his business. He said he was sorry. He said the word twice distinctly, as if he wanted to make sure I heard it both times. I heard it both times. I did not call him back. I saved the voicemail in the baseline documentation folder because it was documentation, and I keep documentation, and someday perhaps it will mean more to me than it does now. Regret expressed in private to the injured party is not the same as accountability expressed to the people who needed to hear it. I know the difference. I believe he does too. The note, the cream paper with the small monogram, lives on my desk. Not framed. Not displayed. Simply present, the way a true thing is present, without requiring decoration. I visit the house on Carmody Lane on weekends when I can manage it. The garden needed work. I have been doing the work. In the spare room, my grandmother's quilt is still on the bed. I have not moved it. I enrolled the property in a community land trust program that allows first-generation homebuyers to access affordable housing in the neighborhood. Carmody Lane will, when I am finished with it, serve as a transitional residence for a family who needs a start. Grandfather Eli had been, before he retired, a housing advocate. I found this out from Gerald Ashworth when I asked about the history of the house. I had not known. I had simply followed the logic of the thing. That is often how it works, I find. When you pay attention to what someone actually valued, not what they said, not what they performed, but what they signed and saved and quietly ensured, you find out who they were. And you find out who they thought you were. Grandfather Eli thought I was precise. He was right. And he planned for it. What my family confused for coldness was simply attention. What they confused for compliance was patience. What they took from me, Marcus, the breakfast table, 2 years of a relationship I believed in, was taken with the confidence of people who had never once been asked to show their receipts. I did not take anything back. I simply stopped letting the balance go unexamined. That is not revenge. Revenge requires wanting something. I did not want what they had. I simply stopped pretending that what was mine was available for distribution to people who never asked whether I was tired. Grandfather Eli understood this. He planned accordingly. I go to the house on Carmody Lane and I work in the garden and I sit sometimes in the spare room under the quilt and I think about a man who called me the precise one like it was a warning, not knowing that someday I would understand it as the highest thing he knew how to say. If this story reminded you that attention is not coldness, that patience is not permission, and that the people who keep the receipts are keeping them for a reason, take that with you. Check what you've been carrying. Update what needs updating. Tell someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.